Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Loss. My name is Aditi Leverage, and I am the founder and CEO of the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Center, and I'm also a bereaved parent.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danyelle and I'm the Vice Chair of the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Board and the Director of Operations for the center. I am a bereaved parent as well.
And today, Danielle and I wanted to chat about pregnancy after loss. This is a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts. For those of you who don't know too much about me or how the center was founded, I started my coaching business and then in turn ended up finding the center based on supporting people through pregnancy after loss, because my own personal experience in pregnancy after loss was so deeply profound and life-changing and unexpected that I really felt that there needed to be more conversation and more support around this particular part of the loss journey. So Danielle, I know both you and I have experienced pregnancy after loss. We both have quote unquote rainbow children. I know the rainbow term does not resonate for everybody, but I'm using that term here just because it's people understand what that is. But we both have living children after previous loss. I would like to just dig in and talk about the actual stuff that people don't talk about in pregnancy after loss. So I would like to hear, because I don't know actually if you and I have ever talked about your experience of pregnancy after loss. I know you've heard little bits of my journey with it, but I don't know that I've actually heard about yours.
I don't think I've talked too much about it. Pregnancy after loss was something that I feared from the moment my daughter Emmeline passed away in 2012. I had read all these articles on all these and blogs about all these individuals that were giving birth again and how scary it was. And I really felt deep down because my daughter passed away from a true knot in her cord, as well as the cord was wrapped around her neck 4 times. The doctors and the nurses and my midwife all said the same thing. This was a freak accident. There's nothing you could have done. But going into another pregnancy, again, there's nothing that can be done to prevent this. Maybe more appointments with and ultrasounds can help, but there's actually nothing that can stop it. Mm-hmm. And through that, it made me very scared to go into another pregnancy. So I waited almost over a full year before we got pregnant with our quote rainbow daughter, who was not a rainbow when she was born. She's a bright light, but when she was born, she was not. She was a very cranky child, and her delivery was also extremely stressful. And I don't think I was prepared moving into it like I probably could have.
Mm-hmm. So when you say that, well, first I want to just talk about what you said there, the rainbow child, right? I think the reason why our community uses the term rainbow child is because it feels very yes, there's a light at the end of this journey, but I think it also puts a lot of pressure, number one, on that child to be something. And then it also, I think, is very dismissive of the child that didn't come before them, right? That child wasn't a storm, right? If you think about Emmelina, your daughter that you lost, I don't think that you would ever view her as this dark storm, right? So I used to quite frequently use the rainbow baby term when I first started working in the community, and I quickly started to see that I didn't think that was the right fit. For me, I just say my living child my child born after loss. That's usually what I'll say. But when you say that you didn't get I can't remember what you said, if it was the right support or you didn't move through it.
So it was a combination, and I'll be completely honest, as I've shared in previous podcasts, I didn't really deal with my grief until about 3 years ago. So that would have put Natalia at 2, who is my living child after Emmelina. So I was in this kind of gray bubble in which I thought I was preparing myself prior to pregnancy that I was going to lose this child, that what could be the outcome. So I need to be strong enough to lose this child, because it wasn't something that the doctors could stop or help. My previous daughter that I'd had, who's now 15, well, when I gave birth to her, she had the cord wrapped around her neck. And the doctor at that time had said, oh, it's normal, it happens, it's all good. So when you've had now 2 pregnancies where the cord is wrapped around your baby's neck, and one is a living child and one is one that's passed, the likelihood that I would deliver a child who could have the cord wrapped around their neck was extremely high. And when you talk to the doctors and the midwives, everybody will tell you the same thing, which is it's a fluke. We don't know why it happens. The baby just gets themselves turned around. And so it was a risk. And so going into the pregnancy, I very quickly dissociated myself from the pregnancy. I was extremely sick. I was in a lot of pain, and through the whole quote rainbow pregnancy, that I just kind of quickly was like, I just have to get through this. I just have to get through this. The date is November 18th. I'm going to give birth to this baby. Then they moved it up because they were like, we don't want to wait that long. It was just like, I just have to get to this date. I just have to get to this date. I can do anything till I get to this date. But then you go into that labor and all these emotions and all the stress comes out, because wouldn't you know it, Natalia, my living child, had the cord wrapped around her neck. Her heart rate was decelerating. They were trying to induce me, but I wasn't inducing properly. Then she was having all these problems in the womb. And all I kept saying to the doctor was, I don't care what you do, give me a living child. Like, that's all I kept saying. And the doula I had with me and my husband and the nurses, they're all staring at me like, although everybody knew the story and was aware that I'd had a previous stillbirth, they still kept looking at me like, why are you saying this? Like, you just want a live child. And that's how I went into it. I just want to come out of this pregnancy with a live child. I don't care whatever happens, just a live child.
Yeah, and so obviously for you, the labor was very traumatic. But how did you deal with like those 9-10 months leading up to Natalia's birth?
I'll be completely honest, I didn't. I was very miserable. I was very grumpy. I really did my best to kind of dissociate from my body. So where with Natalia, with Emelina and Kat, I might have complained a little bit, or I would have celebrated the pregnancy. I didn't want baby showers. I didn't put a nursery together. We put the bare minimum items in our bedroom so that if this child did not live, Marius could come home and take them out. Like, I didn't want to do a nursery. I didn't want to do anything I'd done with Emelina. I wanted it to be so that if she didn't come home, I didn't have to deal with all this stuff. Like, I didn't even want to put the car, I refused to put the car seat in my car, because I said to my husband, I have to stay at the hospital anyways, because because of the way that this delivery is going to go. You can put the car seat in if she lives. Like, every comment I made and everything I did through the 9 months was, if she lives, let's do this.
Yes. Which is so common, like with all of the clients that I have, even with my own experience, that's so common. And I think that that's a piece that, like, pregnant after loss people don't know about, how common it is for that fear of putting the nursery out, of the fear of having to take it down again, not wanting to put in the car seat, using language like if, right? Not when this baby comes home, but if this baby comes home. So I guess, so you didn't deal with it. I was the same way. Did that impact your postpartum period at all with Natalia, that disconnect?
It totally impacted it. It impacted it in 2 ways. So shortly after she was born, we did a 6-week trip with a newborn, which was nuts, but that's what happens when you have your 3rd child. We did a trip to visit family and friends, and halfway through that trip, everything just came crashing down on me. the emotions came, everything that I was holding together just came crashing down on me.
Mhm.
We were staying at a friend's house, and I just didn't want to even spend any time with my friends. I didn't want to be with my baby. I didn't want to be anywhere. I got into this space. And again, this is 6 years ago. There wasn't a lot of resources other than the mainstream postpartum resources. And I refused to go see or join any postpartum programming at that time, because I felt like nobody would understand where I was coming from, and why I had all these fears, and why I was melting down over little stuff. And yet that can be normal in postpartum, but for myself, there was a lot more to it. There was a lot more grief to it. There was a lot more anger about the fact that I was in this situation, and I was worrying about her sleeping. Was she sleeping too long? Was she breathing? I was worrying about all these symptoms that when I had my first child, I didn't worry about 90% of this. I was pretty relaxed. I went back to work at 6 weeks with my oldest. I had her in daycare. I had all these things. I was a very relaxed parent. Coming into my third, I was the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And this, for me, I didn't have living children prior to now my one living child. But I had 2 losses previous to that. And my pregnancy with my son was, I had random bleeding at 12 weeks. And I remember driving to the hospital, just hysterically crying. And I said to my partner, I was like, if this pregnancy ends in loss too, like, I am done. And I meant it. Like, had that pregnancy ended in loss, I think that would have been the end of the road for my parenting journey, because I just could not take it anymore. It was extremely difficult. Then at 20 weeks pregnant, for the 20-week scan, we went in, and of course they were telling us that there was chance, due to my age and some things I found, that my child could have Down syndrome. So that further disconnected me from the pregnancy. As soon as I went in and they said there's a chance of child having Down syndrome, first they said you could go and have an amniocentesis, which I did not want to do because I knew that it carried risks for loss. And I was like, I just don't want to do that. Everybody, this was like a completely personal decision on our part here. Everybody chooses their own path in this regard. For us, I knew that this baby, I just wanted to have this baby. But I wanted to be prepared if we were going to be raising a child that had other needs. And so we were actually the second couple in Alberta to receive the non-invasive blood test. At that time, it had just come out literally the day before, because I said to my doctor, I'm not doing the amnio. And he was like, well, what are you going to do then? Right. And I'm like, well, I guess we'll just find out when I go into labor. And then he was like, actually, there's this blood test and you can actually get it. It's $700 out of pocket to get, and it's a 2-week wait for results. Luckily, my partner's insurance covered the $700 because we were considered high risk. So we got it done. Those 2 weeks to wait for the results was one of the most stressful time, but it was also one of the most grounded times I think ever, even since I've had my child. I think it was one of the most grounded 2 weeks that I've ever been. I meditated consistently. I sat with both choices and just got really comfortable with whatever was going to happen. This was going to be a part of my journey. And then of course we got the results that everything was okay. But after that point, like, even though we got the results, everything was okay, that was it. Like, I could not connect to the pregnancy after that point. I kind of took it as this, like, something bad is bound to happen. Not that having a baby born with special needs is bad, and that's not at all what I'm saying. But I just kept feeling like the other shoe was going to drop in the pregnancy, because there was the bleeding unexplained. Then there was the scan that, most people just kind of go to the scan and come back and, that's it. I had not heard of anybody else even having to go through what I had experienced, and the whole system. Like, I remember going in for the non-invasive blood work, and the nurse at the high risk clinic she said to me, so you're getting the blood work, you still have to have ultrasound. And I said, why? I literally had an ultrasound like 2 days before. That's why I'm here. So why do I have to have ultrasound? Because ultrasounds were very traumatic for me. And she heard words literally to my face was, well, we need to make sure that the baby isn't dead.
Wow.
Yeah. Danyelle, when I left that, I called the clinic and I was like, I need to speak to a manager. Like, this is unacceptable. And I reamed them out. And I mean, obviously it was a very stressful time. I was hormonal, but that is not okay.
No,
that is just not okay ever. The clinic apologized, of course, for that person's lack of bedside manner. But after that point, I really disconnected. So for the next 19, 18 weeks of my pregnancy, I was very much like you, like, just get through it. Everything will be fine. When baby's in my arms, and holy shit, was I wrong. Things did not, because I totally just didn't address how I was feeling. Everybody was like, yay, this is the furthest you've made it in pregnancy. Now you know the results. Baby's like, quote unquote, healthy. We had found out the gender, you know what you're having. And it was just like, I never talked about though, like these other layers that were underneath it, that I was just inside, like, so overwhelmed and so anxious and so disconnected and so worried and fearful that, like, I just didn't talk about it. So then it just kept getting pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. So that by the time we did go into labor, my body literally was not able to give birth. I ended up in an emergency C-section, and I honestly feel like I really, me, I very much believe in mind-body connection. And I really believe that the fear and the lack of me speaking up about the fear prevented my body from birthing my child how it needed to.
I 100% believe that was the same cause with myself, because I I didn't have an induction with Kat. I had a natural birth. Everything went great. The doctor looked at me and said, you could have 20 more of these. Like, you are made to give birth. Like, this was great. Your labors are short. Like, you're great. We then went in to be induced with Emelina, and my body did not want to induce. And again, we gave birth and it was okay. With Natalia, it was my body. I was in the hospital. They were trying everything to get me to go into labor, and it wasn't working. And then when they broke my water, hoping that would progress it, they ended up having to pump more water fluid back in, because that was causing other issues. And it wasn't until I finally had an epidural, where I think I just was so tired and my body just needed something else, that everything started to happen, and all the alarms stopped going off, and the 25 people that it felt like were running in my room or outside of my room waiting for this to go sideways, it just stopped. So that by the time she came, it was more peaceful. Mm-hmm. But I fully believe that it was because of everything I was feeling. And it also stemmed from even going into the doctor's offices. So when you shared, the nurse who said, well, we have to make sure the baby's, not dead, I felt that the care I was getting from the doctor at that time wasn't interested in my story. Mm-hmm. I was considered high risk because I had a stillbirth, not because I had gestational diabetes or any of these or miscarriages, or that I couldn't hold a baby to term. That's not why I was there. I was there because I needed extra monitoring. And I felt like my story, the doctor at that time could care less about it. Mm-hmm. He was like, hey, let's look at all this stuff. You're good. Do you need to be off work? Do you want to go to work? Okay, I want you to meet with my social worker to go through these questionnaires, because we have to make sure that your mental health is great. Well, you know what?
You lie on those questionnaires. I mean, most people lie on those questionnaires.
I 100% lied my way through it.
So did I.
Nobody was going to tell me, I knew where I was, but I wasn't going to tell anybody else that. Mm-hmm. I had a different care person who took the time to make sure in that doctor's room that everything was good, I might have shared a little bit more. But when I was already being felt like I was taking up time that somebody else could use, I wasn't speaking up about my mental health. I wasn't speaking about, you know, the fear that I was seeing. All I wanted was for somebody to get this baby out of me so that I could just like get through all of this.
Well, and I really felt like something was wrong with me. Honestly, I felt like something was wrong with me, not in the physical sense. I felt like something mentally was wrong with me. That's how my care team, and I'm not saying, again, we are not saying medical care teams are bad. They save babies, they save lives every day. This is just our personal experiences of the journey. And I do want to put a disclaimer too on the 20-week scan. Lots of people get different news at that 20-week scan and make a multitude of different decisions. And each family is, that's our right as families, and we support choice within the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Center, but we're talking about our experiences. And I really felt like my care team made me feel like something was wrong. Every time I'd go in, everyone was so excited about the pregnancy, and they'd hear the heartbeat and they'd be like, oh, this is exciting. And when I didn't show the joy and stuff, it was automatically like, oh, something's wrong with your mental health, right? Where now I know, working in this community for 5 years, nothing's wrong with your mental health. You are experiencing pregnancy after loss, which is a wild ride. A wild ride. It has like an intense highs and intense lows and everything in between. And all of it is very normal. And what I think I needed at that time was for someone, anyone, to normalize what I was experiencing. Because I honestly felt like something was really wrong with me. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a terrible mom. I'm not going to love this child, even though I know I desperately want this child. There was just so many things that were happening internally for me that nobody was really validating, I think. And I think that was like the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, and I think that is something that I also felt. And I never had, when I had a different type of care in my second pregnancy that ended up in a loss, and out when I moved to Alberta, and that was done in BC. So when I moved out to Alberta and I was giving birth, I didn't get the same options that I would have gotten had I been in BC. And I also felt like I was grieving those options without actually even saying them. It was more like, hey, you're with your doctor for like 27 weeks, and then we're going to throw you over to the high risk clinic, and then they're going to see you a few times, and then we're going to book your appointment and we're going to send you in. I didn't feel like anybody was like involved or cared about the pregnancy, I guess, so that it made me feel like, well, then it's okay if I don't care about it. It's okay if
Yes.
I am disconnected, because it feels like everybody else around me is disconnected. Whereas with my
Yes.
second pregnancy, I never was made to feel like that. My first pregnancy, 100%, they were so it was, I had such great care in my first two pregnancies that I went into this one expecting that same care. When I didn't get it, I was like, well, obviously they're expecting it to be a stillbirth too. So, you know, I can disassociate.
Yes. And
And
that's the thing, is
that's
that
what I felt. That's not that
yeah,
that's what was going on around me, but that's just what I was made to
that's how
feel.
you internalize. Yeah, that's how you took it and internalized it. Yeah, again, this is not saying that those care people did something wrong or anything like that, but that was the message you received, right or wrong. That's what you took in. But that is the thing, is that it's treated like you said it, I think you nailed it on the head, is that it was treated like a pregnancy and not not your child. And that's exactly how I felt. Even after my kiddo was born, it still felt like, so I ended up with emergency C-section. I had major troubles breastfeeding. So my son had lost weight at birth, which I didn't know. Now I know is very common. At the time I didn't, but they were making it feel very, like very emergent, which just was really traumatizing for me because I'd never had a living child up until that point. But even then it was more like, this is a baby. This is not like, when you have a child, like that is your life, right? And so I was still disconnecting there, like, okay, well, he has to eat this much, he has to poop this much. Like literally I was monitoring that kind of stuff instead of like creating bonds with that child, which I needed to. Instead of focusing on poops and pees and feedings, I should have been bonding with my child in those first initial weeks, which that was not the messaging that I was receiving from most people around me.
And I think that is where when it's your first child after loss too, it's different. Like for myself, this was my third child. This was my second living child. I'd already breastfed a baby that was like totally fine, and I connected. So when the nurses or anybody was like, "Oh, well, we don't know about this weight," I was like, "She's fine." You know why she's fine? Because my first was fine.
Yeah, you have that confidence as a parent.
I had the confidence, but I only had the confidence because I'd already had one,
Yeah,
quote, normal.
yeah,
So I could be like, no, I'm not coming back, or yeah, I'll do this. Um, but even then, that confidence wasn't always the right confidence, because sometimes had somebody like really taken the time to connect, or if I'd had somebody to be able to really connect with, I probably would have stopped breastfeeding or introduced the bottle much sooner to
Mhm.
provide myself some relief instead of being
Yeah,
a parent. I don't think I ever gave myself enough grace, because when I had my first child, I was 25, my husband was home all the time, we were newly married. We had it. We had family to surround us. I never felt like I was overwhelmed with my first child, but with my third, I felt like I was overwhelmed all the time. Partially emotions, partially because I'd already done this once, so I can continue to do it again, forgetting that I had my mom who would take my daughter for a couple hours every day so I could get like a break or sleep. This time around, I didn't have any of that. And I never gave myself grace. So I went till she was like over 2 before I finally said, maybe I'm not okay.
yeah,
Maybe I need to start seeing somebody. But
yeah,
even when I made that decision at 2, it still wasn't connecting, and it still wasn't working.
yeah. Yeah, I so agree. And I wanted to go back, as you had said that you didn't want to join any like parenting groups with like quote unquote people who didn't understand. And that was me in my pregnancy after loss. So we hired a doula. Um, and we decided, I was like that. I was adamant that I didn't want to go to prenatal classes with other people who, in my mind, had not experienced loss and just got pregnant and everything was easy. That I'm not saying that that's who attends the mainstream, but that's who I thought attended, and I did not want to be a part of that. So we hired our doula to do like private prenatal classes for us, which was lovely, but we really further isolated ourselves, because those prenatal classes are like a great opportunity to meet other parents in a similar space that you are, right? So I always feel, when I look back on it, I actually have a lot of regret for that decision. I give myself compassion because I understand why I made that decision, but I regret it in the same form, because we really lost out on like those first initial years. Like I did not have friends. I was the first in my circle of friends to have a child. So all of my friends that I was meeting, I was having to meet them for the first time and find them. And like, how do you find it? It's so hard to make friends. And then like with a baby, it's even harder, because like, where do you really go? Right. And then I didn't want to like open up about really how I was doing, because I thought, out of fear that people were going to be judging me. But had I been connected to a community like the one that we're building at the center, it would have been so vastly different, I think, which is, I mean, this is why we're doing this work. And really excitingly, we probably should announce that we are going to be offering prenatal classes specifically for pregnant after loss parents, because as we were talking about here, it's complex. It's not as simple as learning about labor and birth and taking baby home. There's a whole layer of other stuff that's there. And so we're really excited about that. So if you are listening or watching today and you are pregnant after loss, please follow us on social media and keep updated on our website, because we'll be posting those details soon. We're just so very blessed that we got some funds from the Tiny Footprints Gala that we can contribute to this very, very important, I believe, very important course or classes.
I know that it's something that I wish I could have taken. We took prenatal with my first one. I was like, I don't need it for the third. I don't want to connect. And like I said, I did end up joining fitness classes to help with my mental health, but I was very shielded. I didn't share a lot about my experience. I went in with it with like kind of a face, like I prepared myself for what I was going to do. And I didn't share a lot. I mean, I was blessed to make some amazing connections through that class, but they were very shielded for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so I mean, this is pregnancy, like I said at the beginning, pregnancy after loss is really why I started doing the work that I do, and what really led me to finding the center. As we said, it doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong with your mental health. It's that you are experiencing the whole gamut of emotions that come with pregnancy after loss. What you need during pregnancy after loss for support can look different, and that's why we have so many different options for you. Like, we've got coaching, we do have the formal counseling piece, and then we have somatic healings, we have tarot card reading, we have yoga, we have a hotline, like peer support groups, our pregnant after loss peer support group, so that you can choose which one is right for you. I know a big chunk of my clients that I see are pregnant after loss, and I give them the tools that I know A, work, B, that I needed, that nobody gave me, like tangible tools during a pregnancy after loss that you can utilize. Not to, I always like to say, not to fix yourself, because there's nothing wrong in your mind when you're pregnant after loss. You are not broken. Your heart is broken. Right? So actually, like, the tools that I like to give my clients is we move out of that intellectual mind space and more into the heart, spiritual body space, where really in a pregnancy after loss, that is our first point of disconnection. We disconnect from our bodies. We disconnect from this experience of this pregnancy, because we're always in the past of what kind of happened previously, or what could maybe happen in the future, right? But if we actually start connecting in this space that I'm speaking of, we connect to presence, and that's where the joy, those pockets of joy in pregnancy after loss live.
Right.
It's in the present moment. But if we are ignoring the fact that we're pregnant and we're just pushing it down, as you and me did in our pregnancies after loss, even those pockets of joy will not come up. And I'm a testament to that. It did not come up. I'm telling you, when I say that I did not experience joy in my pregnancy after loss, I did not experience even pockets of joy in that pregnancy. And that saddens me, because my child is my only living child and will be my only living child. I will never get to experience pregnancy again. And it breaks my heart when I think of that. And so when I coach people in pregnancy after loss, when we create these programs for pregnancy after loss, it is not based because this is what we think people need. Like, this is like what I've coached hundreds of pregnant after loss people, our own experiences. This is what you may not need that exact thing, but at least there's an option for something else that starts to move you from this space of thinking that something's wrong and moving you more into presence, where joy can exist. It's not going to be there the entire pregnancy. I can guarantee you that. Pregnancy after loss, you will not feel joy for the entire pregnancy, but you can connect to those like small pockets of joy if you get, I think, tools that resonate with you and a community that relates to you.
Yeah, I think it's that community and those tools that it would have been so key, because my pregnancy after loss was my final pregnancy. There will be no more pregnancies. The risks of stillbirth is way too high in my case, that it's not something my husband and I are comfortable doing, as well as, we'll talk about it in another podcast, but, our partners also experience that pregnancy with us. And there's a lot of trauma that they experience that sometimes we don't even experience. So
yes, and oftentimes it's a delayed response to trauma that they experience. So sometimes that it doesn't come up until years later, as I have learned in my own journey. but yes, so I think the highlight of today's conversation is to have the conversation, right? So if you are pregnant after loss and you are feeling disconnected, worried, anxious, fearful, any of those emotions, it's normal. The whole gamut of emotions is normal. There's no one way to feel. There's no one decision, as we spoke about. Every family's decision in any pregnancy is your own. But I would say the biggest thing that I would say to you, if like looking back on my own journey, the biggest thing that I would say is surround yourself with people that can relate. Number one, let yourself be vulnerable. Number two, and yeah, I would say start to connect to others and start to connect with yourself in this pregnancy, because this is your life, right? In retrospect, like I said, if I were to look back, I look back on my pregnancy with a lot of sadness, and I regret that. Had that pregnancy ended in loss, I still would have had that same regret, because I just wanted to experience this last pregnancy that I was able to have with more joy, more love. I think that's it. And also, one thing I want to say, and I say this often to my pregnant after loss clients, is I think there is no group of people that is more courageous and more just grounded in love, because for us to choose that love, even knowing the risk of loss, I think is just such an optimistic act, even if that means that you are choosing not to get pregnant again, as both Danyelle and I have mentioned. Those were our last pregnancies. And to do so out of love for yourself, because you know that that's what supports your mental health and your well-being, is one of the most courageous acts. If we can follow like love and always work from that space, I admire that so much. And so I admire this community for like the bravery and the courage that we show up with every single day in any choice that we make, because every choice is challenging and difficult. And yeah, I just wanted to say that it's just such a privilege to hold space for all of you.
It really is a privilege. And I think the connection, whether it's with yourself, whether it's with the people around you, whether it's with like-minded people, the connection is the piece that is the key to pregnancy after loss.
Yes, agreed. There's one thing I just want to read, if I can find it before we close. I often refer to it for my pregnant after loss parents, and I'm assuming that most of you who are listening or watching, I keep saying listening, but watching, watching this particular podcast are either pregnant after loss or have been pregnant after loss or are considering pregnancy after loss. So I just wanted to share this one thing, if, like I said, if I can find it quickly. If I can't, then maybe what we'll do is we'll include it in the post. I found it. Perfect. Okay. It is from a book called Time Remembered. And it is a quote here, and I think we can probably end the podcast with this, but it says, "It is a risk to attempt new beginnings, yet the greater risk is for you to risk nothing, for there will be no further possibilities of learning and changing, of traveling upon the journey of life. You were strong to hold on. You will be stronger to go forward to new beginnings."
So beautiful and so correct.
So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Beyond the Loss. Thanks, Danyelle.
Thank you.